schools in England, they've been told there is no general duty to allow children to change their gender identity.
Yeah, it's part of long-awaited guidance for schools and colleges for pupils who question their gender.
But government's transgender guidance doesn't completely block social transition. Minister for Women and Equality's Kemi Badenoch argues a blanket ban is simply unworkable.
You can't outright ban social transitioning because it has many elements in it which are perfectly fine. For instance, changing a name. Anyone can change their name if they want to. Parents can change a child's name by default. The government shouldn't be getting involved in people's lives in that way. However, there are many things that are important, like single-sex spaces, for instance, like making sure the sport is fair and that boys aren't playing in girls' sports, for example, and hurting them, where they have totally different physical characteristics that remove all sorts of fairness that you would expect to take place in sport. That's what the guidance is there for. It is practical advice to ensure schools know how to deal with this very difficult situation.
Well, we know this has been a bit of a headache for the government. It's taken a while for this guidance to finally be published. So let's speak to religious education teacher and transgender man, George White, who joins us now. Thank you very much for your time, George. So do you welcome this guidance being published? Do you think this will be helpful to schools? What do you make of it?
I think that the delay hasn't been helpful, and certainly releasing it perhaps at this time is also not particularly helpful, bearing in mind most schools are tying up for Christmas. However, the guidance has some reasonable suggestions in the clip you've just shown of Kemi Badenoch. You know, actually, the guidance legally has been that single-sex spaces are protected in schools and that you are quite able to, by law, remove somebody from those spaces if they are not of that biological sex.
Do you think if a child comes to school and they tell a teacher, if they're a girl, they tell a teacher, you know, I think I'm a boy and I want to transition at school, please don't tell my parents. Do you think teachers should have to tell the child's parents?
I think this is where some of the educators are probably looking at this issue in a little bit more detail. The guidance that's been released is not statutory. The guidance that we have that's statutory in schools, keeping children safe in education, does highlight that LGBT pupils might be at harm if you are immediately to go and tell a parent. Of course, in an ideal scenario, most of us as educators would want parents to be informed of what's going on, but there are some cases where this can cause serious harm, in which case the statutory guidance would say that we don't have to inform parents.
George, can I ask you, 10, 15 years ago, it was very rare. I mean, I personally had never heard of a school child who was coming out as trans or non-binary. What's behind this massive increase in just that? I mean, is it, as some people have suggested, what they call social contagion?
I mean, it could be, it might not be. I've spoken before on this, and, you know, I never had any trans representation when I grew up, yet here I am as a trans individual living and thriving. So I think people get more comfortable. There's the statistics that are often kind of at the side of this. When we started to accept that people were left-handed rather than making them right-handed, the number of left-handers exponentially grew. For some people, it may be a phase, and that's why, you know, ruling out social transition would be silly, which they haven't. And for some people, it may not be a phase, like myself.
So if and when you have a pupil coming to you saying that, you know, I think I might be trans, I'd like some help or advice coming out, at what point do you stretch that advice to? I mean, the ultimate, the extreme end of the spectrum is that when they become an adult, they will go down what they call gender-affirming surgery or care. I mean, do you discuss those kind of options with kids who come to you?
No, it's not really necessary. It's not really my place to. You know, I'm not someone who's going to be prescribing hormones. I'm not someone that's going to be performing surgery. I'm not someone that's going to give them official diagnosis of gender dysphoria. But if I can do something that allows them to feel more comfortable in the immediate, which might be changing name, and people can do that. You know, I've taught other kids that are not trans that want to change their name. If there's something in that sense we can do to make someone feel more comfortable, then yes, we do it. But we recommend, you know, going to the appropriate channels to get the right support that someone would need.
Yeah, just lastly, because under this guidance issued by the government, teachers don't actually have to use self-identified pronouns, so they could simply refuse to call a boy by his preferred female pronouns. In practice, Do you think it would be easy for teachers to refuse to do that, or is there a lot of pressure on teachers, if you can speak to this, to go along with the child's wishes?
Well, according to UK law, and as far as I can tell, I'm not a lawyer, but according to UK law and some of the things that I've seen already, we are supposed to be respectful of those pronouns, and we are supposed to use them. Misgendering could be seen as causing harm to somebody. However, the document has released a little bit of support in that scenario, that if you don't want to use the pronouns, you can use the child's preferred name to refer to them instead. So maybe that's a middle ground for the time being.